Chat Show. My name is Jack McLean, and this is our weekly update. I'll be talking about a safe way to work on your athletic development program with junior footballers. So make sure to tune in. If you've got any questions, either via our Instagram or YouTube, use the comment section to send them through to me, and I'll make sure to answer all your questions. Doesn't need to be on this topic either, so feel free to ask me anything about your Australian rules football, or for Australian conditioning coaches tuning in as well. Happy to answer any questions. But let's get straight into it. The three topics that I'll cover that seem to be quite popular, particularly when speaking to parents of young athletes, is all about lifting weights. There's still some fear around that, which is fair enough. Age. So what age should athletes be taking their training seriously from a physical athlete development point of view? So thinking running capacity and strength training. And then ultimately, what should parents do with their kids when they're in a pretty demanding program, playing sports, school, and often will have other curriculums that they need to do within that, whether it be social activities or outside of sporting activities like drama or dance classes. So there's plenty going on with kids today, and we need to make sure that we're not overwhelming them with activities so they're able to actually enjoy the process. So when I'm talking about junior athletes, I'm referring to anyone that's older than the age of 10. So that 10 to 16 age. Typically, once kids are hitting 16, they'll naturally start lifting weights with their friends or with their school or even their local football club. Certainly from a conditioning point of view, start doing some running and taking training a little bit more seriously. But from 10 to upwards to 15, it seems to be still a lot of confusion on what's appropriate. So to start with, lifting weights, there's no strong research for those parents that are concerned that lifting weights at a young age will stunt your growth. So if that is a fear of yours, there's nothing to suggest that. And certainly in my experience, I've never experienced that. I've been working in the strength and conditioning fitness industry for 13 years now, and I've never heard of a case where an athlete had stunted their growth from lifting weights. From a optimal point of view, we want to make sure when a junior athlete is training in the gym that they are focusing on technique, number one. So they're setting themselves up with good fundamental habits. And that's really learning how to squat, hinge, press, pull, brace, rotate, acceleration technique, deceleration technique, change of direction, different planes of motion with change of direction that comes with that. And of course, how to condition themselves properly from a programming point of view, not just going for only doing the same type of running, whatever they've been used to before, maybe only doing sprint training or only doing long distance running, but there's a lot in between those that we want to make sure that we're doing. Because as we know with Australian rules football, your body is under demand, both at an intensity point of view, but also volume. So we want to make sure we're training all those energy systems to work together as they do best. So from a technical point of view, typically I'll slow movements down and focus on the appropriate movement pattern, and also an opportunity for the athlete to understand what success feels like. Constraints-based coaching can be really, really helpful, and using analogies for the athletes to understand, jumping like a kangaroo, for example, so that they've got a good visual and idea and concept of what we're looking for those drills. So keeping it really simple, keeping the volume down, so longer rest periods, because as we know, rest periods will allow quality and intensity. So we're not doing lots of circuit-based metabolic conditioning type sessions, tend to avoid those. But what we'll do is maybe 3-way rotations of total body gym work. And that way, the athletes, particularly while they're building up their training age, they're not going to have a horrible experience where they pull up really, really sore the next day. That's definitely something I've made that mistake before with young athletes, and they've never done any training before. And obviously it's a new stimulus. So if you hit the legs and do a little bit too much volume with that athlete and they can't walk for the next 2 days, straight away, if that's their first experience in the gym, it's not going to be a good one and one they're going to want more of. So typically I stick with 2 working sets, maybe 1 set just to feel it unloaded, so they get an idea of what the movement is like and they get to make some mistakes, and then 2 sets, and typically that 3rd set is usually their best set, so they actually feel on leaving on a high, but typically around that 2 to 3 sets I feel is a sweet spot on a movement pattern. And then anywhere between 6 and 8 reps. I tend not to go more than 10 and generally don't go less than 6. I find 6 to 8 is a sweet spot in that there's enough reps in there where they can find good, efficient movement, get the understanding of what we're trying to achieve. So plenty of practice, but also there's not a huge effect of fatigue. Generally speaking, obviously every drill is different. But 6 to 8 seems to be a good sweet spot, and 2 to 3 working sets. And then let's say you're doing like a goblet squat, that's a lower body lift. Then I'll pair that with an upper body movement. Let's say some push-ups maybe on a bench. So they're just getting that full range of motion and controlling their body weight or partially their body weight. And then there might be a core movement, like a simple hollow hold where they're just learning how to push their lower back into the ground and get that concept of bracing where they're pushing, expanding out. And it's a really important concept for athletes to understand in the gym, that we want to create that their own belt, and bracing is a really important tool for back health. And if they don't know how to do that from early on, then they're more than likely, when they do start to progress to loaded squats and loaded deadlifts down the line in the next couple of years, you might not be setting them up for success. They're going to learn the hard way, which is hurting their back potentially, or their knees, or the load can be pushed in other directions. So if we can teach them how to brace, that's a fundamental, and also really helps with their athlete performance, because you can teach them how strong that co-contraction of the core is when we want to do things like change direction or fend someone off, and that generally engages the athletes quite well, opposed to teaching them how to brace for things like they'll be able to back squat heavier weights or deadlift heavier weights. That tends to not really interest field-based athletes. So transfer it to the sport, I find, is a really important one for engaging, particularly those talented athletes and sportsmen that might not gravitate towards the gym, but they do see the value in gym training, or perhaps their parents, see value in gym training, and that's what they're investing their time and energy into, and potentially even money, to reap the benefits of helping their on-field performance. So definitely talk to that. Having some fun and making sure to keep it interesting. So variation is key, and it might only need to be small amount of variation. So if you do 2 weeks of a traditional goblet squat, like I mentioned before, and that bench push up, you might just change with the goblet squat. It turns into they're standing on a slant board to work on more range of motion, for example. And then for the bench push-ups, they might be going really well and easily getting those 8 reps, and you progress them to a full range push-up on their toes for maybe only 6 reps, for example. So keep it interesting, and same with the core movement, if that is the way that you go with that 3-way rotation, rotating that every couple of weeks. So you're getting enough consistency for there to be a carryover from a stimulus point of view. But ultimately, we want to just make sure that the athlete's enjoying the process, they're having fun. So throw in some games at the start of training, or just generally from a rapport point of view, make sure the athlete's laughing throughout the process and there's plenty of smiles. And that's really, really important. So the athlete's having a positive experience. So you can see the general vibe of a session. You're not beating them up with, like I mentioned, metabolic conditioning sessions and hard CrossFit style workouts. You're focusing on technique, you're slowing the movements down, using when appropriate analogies or implicit based coaching where the athlete gets to feel the movement, and that's where video can be really helpful to give them feedback on what you're looking for an athlete, so they understand what success feels like, and then that will ultimately give them some good body awareness. So in the future, they understand when they have done a rep maybe that wasn't optimal, straight away you just let them go, and you see that the second rep they've auto-corrected themselves, and that's a real win and a great moment as a coach when you do that, because ultimately they're going to train by themselves at some point over their career. and definitely encourage them to do that. So then you're setting yourself up for the standards of training to be the same as if you're there. So that's key, having fun, coaching the athletes, and from a communication point of view, we've touched on that. Volume from a total body strength session. And then, as I mentioned, from senior athletes, I keep the volume about 30 to 50% less than what I would program for senior footballers. That's local footballers, not Australian rules footballers, of course. So keep the volume right down, and by having longer rest periods and by doing total body sessions, 3 sessions a week at the most for this age group, that 10 to 15, that covers that. So you're not hitting high frequency. Like sometimes I'll have local footballers that are really focused on being the best they can be. They'll follow our gainers program and they can get up to 5 gym sessions a week. I would stick to 2 to 3 gym sessions for this age group. I touched on the enjoyment factor and how important it is as well from a frequency point of view. They've got a lot of other stresses going on, so there's no point in adding in double days and things like that in the strength and conditioning program. Keep it really simple, and try and, by doing total body sessions, you might get that athlete squatting twice a week opposed to just doing a lower body session once a week. So you're going to get better technique development because of the frequency of exposure, getting those key movement patterns like learning how to squat appropriately and particularly hinging, which can be really hard for athletes to feel and get the concept of how to hinge properly and load their heels. So make sure that you're getting 2 hinge patterns in a week as well will allow you to accelerate that development. So that's from a program point of view. And ultimately, what your parents do, I would recommend, being a parent myself, I take my son, and I'm lucky enough at Schwartz CrossFit in Melbourne. It's a very much community-based gym. There's lots of kids running around, and so it's a great place that I can bring my son to. It's a safe place, and he sees me working out. So I think that's a really healthy thing to do with your kids. And then at times, if he sees someone on an ergo, I've noticed my son, he's only 3.5, will start trying to do that movement pattern, or he might try and do some jumps or some throws and kicking the Swiss ball around. So he's just seeing adults exercise, not for sport or for competition, but just to feel good and to be the best that they can be. So for a really important thing for young athletes to understand is that we don't necessarily only train for performance benefits, but we also just exercise just as generally part of our routine. So I think that's really something I would encourage parents to do. Exercise with your kids, and it's definitely a great bonding time as well that I find. And it can be a lot of fun in your rest periods, just kicking the ball around or mucking around with your child. And then from if that's not possible, I know a lot of parents are super busy with their schedule. They don't have a gym where they can do that. They don't have a home gym. So obviously that becomes really challenging. You might use a local playground, a gym. There's local gyms around the area that are outdoor gyms, or simply just go for a bike ride or a run. Any form of exercise is good. And then from a football point of view, if your kid absolutely loves their football, and there's genuine need, maybe they're having a couple of niggle injuries, or they're just a bit undersized compared to the other athletes they're playing with, and that's affecting their self-esteem. There's definitely a few areas where there's a strong need for physical work and physical development from a professional, and that's when I would recommend referring them to us. So we've got AFL experienced strength and conditioning coaches that have a strong filter. They've seen the AFL and AFLW system. They know what's relevant. So when you're working with us, you can trust that what your child is doing is at the highest level. Not only is it safe, but also it's optimal in preparing them for the future, for if they want to be an AFL athlete or if they just want to be the best they can be and improve their confidence. So if that's something that interests you, make sure to direct message me on our socials or email me at jack@preparelikeapro.com. I'd love to have a chat with you over the phone and talk about how we can service your child with their athlete development. We have coaches all around the country. So there's no doubt we can have a product that will fit the needs for your athlete as well as the budget. Okay, so that's this week's topic. I'm just going to move into a new segment, which I started last week, which is what I wish I knew 10 years ago. And that is 10 years ago, I was a swim teacher, personal trainer, and I knew vaguely about obviously programming, periodization over blocks, micro, macro blocks, and I knew about demonstrations. But for me, very much the coaching wasn't about the whole session flow, like how to brief the session, how to plan what goes into the session, and then how the athlete feels when they're leaving your session. I very much just winged a lot of my workouts. So I had an idea of a concept, of course, of what we're trying to work on. And then from there, I would create the session as we went throughout the 60 minutes. So I think for me, making sure I'm planning my session, so then I can focus on the communication and the effectiveness of delivering that session. I found that's really helpful. And I just plan my sessions in the notes in my phone, and then also blocks in Excel spreadsheet. And that's through learning from other coaches that I've worked with, as well as just trying different methods. And that's something that I wish I started earlier. So for those coaches, personal trainers, anyone working in the fitness industry, if that resonates with you, you're still in that sort of mode where you're just winging your sessions and you haven't got a real clear plan on how the athlete or the client can win that session and what that focus is for that session and for the week, I would recommend starting planning a little bit earlier. And you will find that if you're putting more work into preparation and planning than the actual session itself, the session itself will be set up for a much more successful one and much more effective for the person going through that session. So obviously you don't want to be rigid with that plan, and that's something I did notice, 5 years, 6 years ago when I started over planning. I was so rigid in thinking that we had to stick to that plan, that it affects your ability to be able to read the athlete. So take that into account when you do start putting a lot of time and energy into planning. You don't want to be rigid to that plan. Every session, no doubt you'll be adjusting it slightly, but hopefully by having the bones of the session and how the athlete can successfully complete that session, it'll allow you to, when you're driving to that shift or the day of work, you'll be able to focus on how you're going to deliver that session, which I think whether you call it the art of coaching, if you can focus majority of your energy of that, then you're going to tick both boxes. It's going to be an awesome program as well as a well-delivered program for the client and athlete. So that's something I wish I knew 10 years ago, or I guess I valued a little bit more. And it allows you then to really focus on being adaptable and knowing that every person is different and responds differently to programming. So it allows you to be, I think the best coaches pick up those cues really, really quickly and adjust the plan off the fly to meet that athlete where they are that day. So I think by being clear with your process and your plan, you're able to do that effectively. So that's this week's What I Wish I Knew 10 Years Ago. Let me know what you wish you knew if you were coaching 10 years ago at the start of your career, or perhaps you're well into your career and what you wish you knew 10 years ago. I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to message us on any of our socials or email me. This week on the podcast, we have Carmen Colomer. She's the current head of performance at Perth. And she will be discussing Perth Glory, should be discussing training load and how best recovery methods should be informed from the training load of the athletes. So make sure to tune into that one if you're into your sports science, but also your high performance manager position. Carmen's got a wealth of experience all around the world in those roles. So make sure to tune in on Tuesday at 1:00. We also have Luke Rooney. That will be our Wednesday podcast. I released that a little bit earlier. We had that podcast a couple of weeks ago, so that will be published on Wednesday. He has the Rugby Academy program, and he's one of our Prepare Like a Pro Coaches Academy members. So it's great to have our first member on the podcast. So make sure to tune in on Wednesday for that episode. Nick Murray, who's the head of sports science at Melbourne Football Club. So great to have another colleague on the show. He'll be talking about everything you need to know from a sports science point of view. So as I mentioned with Carmen, it's a big sports science week on the podcast this week on the Prepare Like a Pro live chat show. So make sure if you're interested to tune in and listen to Nick's not only career journey, but also that key topic. That will be on Thursday at 2 p.m. And then as I announced last week, Caleb Morgan has joined our Prepare Like a Pro coaching team. He's got a wealth of experience at the Western Bulldogs. He'll be looking after our athletes who live in the western suburbs of Melbourne. He recently joined our team and is looking after athletes currently. He'll be on the podcast just to basically share his coaching journey, and that will be at 4 p.m. on Thursday as well. So 3 live chat show. And then Friday, we've got a quick update as well. We've moved our Sunday bite-sized episodes where I just basically release either a 10-minute podcast from the collab events that I do from time to time on a key topic, or from an old episode that I did over a year ago to bring it back to life and give you a 10-minute snippet of those episodes, because we had some great guests back then, and because we're pumping out so many episodes on the podcast, they can tend to get missed. So I just want to bring them back to your attention. So if you enjoy that 10-minute episode this week, it's with Lachlan Wilmot on Friday instead of Sunday now. So we have episodes released on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from on our podcast. If you love it, make sure to listen into the whole episode. As I mentioned, we did it over a year ago. Okay, I'm just going to share my screen. We'll go through this week's program and also a quick update on the academy. Okay, so for those tuned into the YouTube channel, you can see here this week I released just yesterday, for those that missed the live Get Better Plan webinar that I did last week with the academy members in the coaches membership. It was all about what I learned from my 4 one-on-one sessions with John Pryor, which the key areas of focus were the 3 big rocks from a athletic point of view: acceleration, agility, and sprint efficiency, motor learning and how to influence that with athletes, and how to plan a successful session plan. So if you're interested in that, it's now in the Get Better Plan section of the academy. For those listening in that aren't a member and you're interested, make sure to head over to preparelikeaproacademy.com.au. We have a membership for footballers, and we also have a membership for strength and conditioning staff, high performance staff, sorry. So if that interests you, I catch up with the members on a monthly basis. We dive into a key topic, and this one for November was with the John Pryor. The next one in December is going to be on December 8th, and that will be 20 key programming principles that are my go-tos when I'm designing a program over a calendar year, and or even just a monthly block for an athlete. So if that interests you, you like to geek out on programming, make sure to join me on December 8th. All academy members, you'll receive an email, and the more people that turn up, the better these chats are. As once the recording and presentation is finished, I hang around and answer any of your questions, or there's just a general round the table discussion on all things to do with high performance sport. So if that interests you and you want to join our community, I'd love to have you on. Like I mentioned, just join preparelikeaproacademy.com.au, and if you sign up to our email list, you get a free 30-day trial. It's only $20 a month as well, so it's pretty cost effective. Going over to our program now. Okay, I'll just click this one here. Okay, so we're into that mode now where majority of footballers have returned to their football clubs for pre-season training for the week of November 21st. So the key with this, and I mentioned this last week, if you've got a football training session on, the conditioning in Team Builder is redundant. Okay, so that conditioning is only in there for those that can't make football training. So obviously, if your club starts on the 28th, which I know a few of you does, then definitely complete the 3 running sessions. However, if you've got a football training session on Monday, Wednesday, Friday, remember you don't complete the conditioning. The strength you do, the strength and power program is absolutely appropriate for someone in pre-season training. Okay, so we just don't want to double up from the running loads point of view. In saying that, if your football club doesn't train on a Saturday and they don't do any hills or fartlek run, and you want to make the most of this pre-season and improve your running, then feel free to add one of these sessions, the running sessions, on the Saturday. Your body should tolerate that okay at this time of year. Generally, football sessions are around 6 to 8 Ks tops. So you should be able to handle an extra 4 to 5 K on a Saturday. Okay, but going into the program, key area of focus, we've gone away from the barbell bench press for a period of time, and in comes in the decline bench press, which takes a little bit of load off the shoulders. We had some pretty high loads there on the barbell bench press, so I just want to offload the shoulders a little bit now that you're getting back into tackling and showing in tackle work. So I've just reduced the volume there. We've got a box squat coming in just to reduce your range of motion. So we did the barbell back squat over off season, great opportunity to work through range and strength through range. Now we've gone to our pre-season and in-season key lift, which is the box squat, which is a great opportunity to really overload your maximum strength, how much force you can put into the ground, because naturally we reduce the range. So for most people, that's above parallel, where they can squat with good posture through their spine, and they're maintaining their weight over their shoelaces. They're not squatting too low where their heels come off the ground. So you've got good support with your feet. Feels good through your groins. So find that sweet spot where you feel most powerful, squat to that depth, and make sure that you're accelerating off the box. So should no doubt be able to lift another 20-30% heavier than your barbell back squat, where there is no box there. Okay, so now we're chasing that max strength, as I mentioned. So I've introed that with this 5 sets of 5. And then, as you'll see, we've got some contrast training coming in now. So a lot more power work in our program. So you do the barbell box squat and then go straight into the drop jumps and the overspeed squat jumps, and they'll just get a good stimulus for speed and power. And reactive strength as well with the drop jumps. And then we've got for those that aren't in pre-season training, or if you're feeling up to it, your club didn't do a 2K time trial this week, then we're retesting. It's been a month since we last did our maximum aerobic speed test, the 5-minute aerobic capacity test. So let's just see where you're at. So do that on Saturday if you have club training, and see if you can get a 5% increment on your results. So get 5% extra distance as a minimum, something you no doubt will get like around 10%, which would be fantastic. I want to see how you go with that. So message me. I'll get an alert on the Team Builder feed, and let's fist bump everyone that gets around that test, particularly those who get some PBs. Remember, on that day, you might feel sore, and your body, you don't need to feel great to train great. So you can be a little bit, have some residual fatigue and still surprise yourself and perform really well on that test because of the bulk of work that you've done over the last month. Okay. Conversely, if it doesn't fall for whatever reason, you stuff up the pacing or you just don't perform well that day, don't stress about it. You're still getting in quality of training and your day will come. Okay, so just bring your best effort with that one for those that are testing. If you're doing a 2K time trial or any sort of fitness testing this week with your football club, though, don't double up. Don't feel like you need to do that aerobic capacity test, okay? That's it. I've introduced, as I mentioned, more power plyometrics and throws in the gym. So you'll notice that reduce the overall volume of lifting and tempo. So you should start to feel the legs pull up a bit better now from the gym work. And that's to accommodate the football load now that we're starting pre-season, where you have a lot more accelerations and decelerations. So to look after your joints, I've just reduced the strength work, but we're getting a little bit more speed and power in the gym. And also for those that can't make football training, I've put in some more speed and agility type work in the conditioning. So make sure you get that in and you also continue to get the football. That's it for this week. If you have any questions, feel free to hit us up in socials. The power tip for this week is start to maximize, this is just a productivity tip, start to maximize your time in transport, if you're driving or if you're catching public transport, with these 3 areas. Either educate yourself. Podcast is a great opportunity to do that. Obviously it's audio, so you don't need to be watching it. You can have your eyes on the road. If it's not educating yourself, it's connecting with family, friends, and colleagues. So phone calls are a great time to do in the car. And then for another productivity tip, it might just be simply reflecting on either how that training session went for the athletes or for the coaches, how the day went from a programming and how you delivered that program. So reflecting on your work. I find that's something I've done quite regularly over the last year. It's been really intentional with the time in the car. Working at Melbourne, we drive a fair bit going out to Casey Fields. So, there's at least an hour and a half there that I could use effectively. And at times, of course, you're going to be cooked and you're just going to listen to the music and switch off. But majority of the time, I'd say 80% of the time, I try and use that time effectively, and it's definitely made life easier. So if you can utilize time in the car, it's a big win for those that are time poor. So give it a go. If it's helpful, let me know what you get up to. What's your favorite out of those three? Is it connecting? Is it educating? Or is it reflecting? And I'll see you guys on the next week.